think we're good.
Take two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MakeCode Arcade Advanced stream. It's just three of us today. I'm Richard, at Richard on the forum.
I'm Shannon, at Shakao on the forum.
I'm Vivian, Live Cheer Flood on the forum.
Cool. So Vivian, is this your second stream or first stream?
It's my second one.
Okay. Cool.
I was on yesterday.
Awesome. So you know the ropes then. You're an expert.
Yes, one day is good enough.
All right. So I think today we're going to continue with our theme this week, which is just kind of implementing different types of weapons. And that sounds a little darker than it is. We're just talking about different ways for you to, interact with your enemies and those sorts of things. Doesn't need to be serious, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to be working on something today, which is from a genre of games that I really like, which is called Metroidvanias. They kind of typically work like platformers where you're jumping around, and they often have an exploration thing, but they also usually you have some sort of like energy blaster, and you're blasting from the left to the right and other things. We did a little bit of this last week, but I'm going to do some updated kind of takes on it, and we'll see how much I can get done in an hour. Specifically, I want to do a charge beam, which would be fun. That's something that's in Mega Man, it's in Metroid, it's in a bunch of different games. So let's start by just doing the basic platformer code. And I'm just going to speed through this because we've done it a lot of times on stream.
Oh, we're doing blocks aesthetic-wise as well.
We are?
Sped things up.
Okay. I want to go back to drawing things at some point. And I'm going to make my hero a little less wide. Okay, let me pull out a tile map block, and I'll set the tile map real quick. I agree, it does make things much faster. It's just
I think it's good for these mechanic-focused sessions, but eventually, yes, we will go back to doing like games.
Yeah. I don't like that all our games are going to end up looking the same, though.
Yeah.
All right, let's drag out the camera follow. And we'll set the gravity. I think I usually use 200. And we're also going to move with buttons, but only in the X direction. All right, cool, we're moving. So let me go ahead and do jumping real quick. So on A button pressed, I'm going to set the velocity. And I'm not going to do the normal stuff that we do for calculating what a good velocity is. I'm just going to eyeball it because that's not what this stream is about today. So, oops, that's a pretty short jump. There you go, that's a little better.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'd rather err on the side of ridiculous, so let's do double that. There we go, nice healthy jump.
Moon jumps.
Yeah. And to make sure I can't fly, I will really quickly, do the checking to see if we were hitting a tile on the bottom. And I really need to get a second mouse because I'm coding all this with a trackpad and it's difficult.
What are you using your first mouse for?
So I have two computers going right now. One's doing the stream and one's doing the coding. And I need the mouse for the one that doesn't have a trackpad built into it. Cool. All right. So now we're going to do our basic firing code. You can use an on B button press to do this, but I find that I generally have better results when I use an on game update because it lets me tweak it more, and it also makes it so that I can make it fire continuously instead of having to do the annoying thing where we have to have a repeat and we have to keep track of all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do on game update. I'm going to create a variable, and this is going to be fire time, or I should say I think it's going to be the time since they pushed down the button, because I'm going to be also using this for the charge. So we want to keep track of how long the player's been holding down the button. So to do that, I'm going to create this thing, and I'm going to call it button downtime. And we're going to set that to a block in the game category, which is time since start in milliseconds. And this just gives us the time since our game started. And right now I'm doing this on game update. That's probably not what we want. We probably want to make sure that the controller button is actually pressed. So let's go into controller and drag out that block. I'm already using the A button for jumping, so I'm going to use the B button. A lot of times it's tough when you only have the A and the B button to do two things. So if I wanted to, I could also make it so up did jump. That's usually acceptable, but I prefer A button just because I was raised on Mario. All right, so if the B button is pressed, we'll set the button time to this. Otherwise, we'll set it to 0, and that'll just, we'll know that that means, it's possible for them to start it when this block returns 0, because there'll be some number of milliseconds before the game starts, so this should be pretty safe. All right, so there's two kind of stages to this thing. The first thing is when you start pressing the button, it's going to charge up for a little bit, and I think I'm going to have some way of displaying that it is charging. And then when you release, it's going to fire a projectile, and the projectile will be bigger depending on how long you charged for. So the first thing I want to do, though, is actually get that code to run when we do the release. So actually creating the projectile. So I'm going to add another condition to this else statement. And I'm going to do else if this. And what I'm going to check here is to see if the button downtime, let's create a get, does not equal 0, because that means we have released our button. And before I forget to, I'm also going to put the set button downtime to 0 so that we remember to clear it here too. Otherwise, this will just keep running every single time the B button isn't pressed. And to do our classic show stuff happening on the screen, let's go ahead and
does not equals in the check.
Yes. Cool. So when I pressed down the B, nothing happened. When I released it, it said smiley face. So this is doing what I want. All right. Now I'm going to create a function, and this is really just to keep the code cleaner. This doesn't need to be a function, but we're going to call it create player projectile. And I'm going to get rid of my sprite say. I'll put it off to the side because I'm surely going to have to print something out at some point. And I'm going to put in my call create projectile here. And we might do some stuff with direction later, but right now I'm just always going to fire to the right because that's easier. I know it's reversed, but I did point in the right. Okay. So we want to create the projectile first, so we're going to use our classic projectile block. And there's two versions of this. We're going to use the one that's from my sprite. And this will make it so that our projectile starts immediately on the sprite. And for now, I'm just going to make them all the same. What's a good color for the projectile?
Red for fire.
Red works. All right, it's going to start out really small if you haven't charged up. We're going to do it with 2 by 2. Okay, you can barely see it, but it is there. Let me get the Y velocity and make this a bit more. So we're moving at 100 pixels per second to the right and nothing in the Y direction. Cool, yeah. That is a perfect size for a minimal charged shot because it's just really disappointing. Makes it clear that you need to charge to actually, do things. All right. So now we want to write the code to actually make it bigger depending on how long you've charged it for. So I could kind of, I guess because we're doing blocky graphics, I could make it so that we just create bigger squares depending on how long you've charged it for, and then launch it that way. But I think the more useful example is to change the image. So I'm going to write the code in that way instead of just generating it on the fly. Let's go ahead and kind of decide what our time, like what the stages for, or how long you need to hold down the button to get a fully charged shot is. So I'm going to create a variable called charge time. I'm going to set the charge time to be the current running time minus the button downtime. So this will give me the number of milliseconds since the player has been holding down the B button now that it's released. And I'm going to switch over that charge time in here and set the image based off of that. So I'm going to leave this code as is right here with this minimal image, and this is going to be it for the minimal size. And I'm just going to change the image in these if statement ones. And that's just going to make the code a little cleaner so that I don't have to specify this velocity in all of the different if statements. OK. So we're going to say if the charge time is less than the minimal one, well, we're not going to do anything right now. I might decide to do something in that case. I think I'm going to have to set like damage values, so I'll probably end up doing that here too. And I think probably I'll do it by half seconds. So we'll make this one 600. This one 1100. That's 1 second and 100 milliseconds. This one will be 1.5 seconds roughly. And then this one will just be fully charged. Oh, whoops, I don't want to do that. I want to go into sprites and get out a set image block, which is way down at the bottom. Change this drop down to be projectile. And OK. So this is our first case. So I'm just going to make the image the same size. For this next one, we're going to make it a bit bigger. I think it should go kind of like logarithmically big or exponentially big.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's try to literally do that and see how crazy it gets. So we'll do 4x4 for this one. For this one, we're going to do 16 by 16, or no, 8 by 8. I could do math. This one's going to be 16 by 16. And the last one would be 32 by 32, but that's just too big for our tile map. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the same 16 by 16, but it's going to be pink, because pink is more powerful. All right, let's try this out. So I hope. I guess I need to set the location also. So what's happening here is when I hold down and I release, it's creating the projectile, but it's creating it at the position where it was initially when I had this image, which is about halfway through the center of the sprite. But when the image is getting bigger, it's not changing the Y location. So it's starting down here inside of the tile map, and that's why you see it for a second, and then it just kind of disappears. I don't know if that's coming through at all for you guys.
I see it flicker. Yeah, so projectiles by default have destroy on wall, right? So
yep.
It's running into the wall.
So to fix that, I'm going to go to the projectile at the end, and I'm going to set the position to be the Y of the player and the X of the player.
I think the biggest one might still. The player's not 16, right? Or. Oh, no, you're good.
Something seems off. Okay. So we're setting the charge to the time since start minus the button down time. And we did set the button down time up here. Oh, that'll do it. So I was setting the button down time before I created this, so it was always equal to 0. And I'm a little confused as to why that didn't.
The difference.
Oh, right, it's the difference. So all of these were always returning false, and so it was getting down to this last one. So now we should see it. Nope, still broken. Okay. So the button down time does not equal 0. I think this is probably a good point for us to debug some stuff. So let's try that out. So I clicked this debug button, and that brought up our debugger interface. You can see that there's now these circles on the left of the block. And when I click on this block, I'm setting a breakpoint here. And what that means is when this code runs, it's going to stop here and pause the game so that I can see what's happening. And that'll hopefully let us figure out what this bug is. So let me hold down B for a bit and release. Interesting. Let me set a different breakpoint. There we go. This is much less buggy in beta, by the way. I fixed a lot of bugs on this recently. Okay. So our charge time is 25, which does not seem correct. Okay, yeah, I was definitely holding down the button for longer than 26 milliseconds.
Maybe set your breakpoint earlier to see where it sets button down time. Or, well, it's not going to show time since start either.
Let me actually set it here so that I'm not messing with the timing of anything. Yeah. So you mean set it here, Shannon?
Yeah. Could it be resetting it?
That is what's happening. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Okay. So my code here is a little messed up. I need to add an if statement around this set because I need to check if B button is pressed and button down time is equal to 0. And only set it in that case.
Yeah.
Yay.
There we go. Now it's all right. So this is good, but it's kind of difficult to gauge how large it's going to be when you release right now. So it would be nice if we gave a visual indication as to how charged it is. So to do that, I'm going to add another function, and it's going to be updating the charge information. So what's the best UI you think for this, guys? We could do a status bar showing how charged it is. We could, I guess, make the player blink. So the way it works in Metroid, I can say, is basically you like hold out your blaster and there's a tiny ball of light, and it gets larger and larger and larger, and then it launches. So we could show the projectile and then make it only launch it when you release.
Yeah, because then you're like, I'm ready to shoot it. Don't test me. And then it's just going to get bigger.
Okay, let's do that. But because we're doing that, I'm going to change the color of our player so that it's not the same as the projectile. We'll do this nice green, teal. Okay. So I'm going to restructure this code a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop using this projectile block right here, or maybe I still will use no, because it has that special logic for 0 and 0. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a sprite. You know what? I'm going to probably change the name of this function so that it's now update player projectile. I'm going to create another function that's called create player projectile. And I'm going to take this projectile part of it and get rid of it. So let me take this out. And I need to set this projectile variable now. So let's go ahead and take out a set block, or I'll just take out a sprite create block. Change this variable to be projectile. I'm going to change the kind to be projectile. And we're going to also set those flags that we need for the projectile behavior. So that's right here. To projectile. Instead of stay in screen, I'm going to do auto destroy, which will automatically destroy the projectile when it gets off the screen. And I'm also going to do destroy on wall, so that if it hits a wall, it won't just stay there forever. Okay. So let me, oh, that's interesting. Hey, Shannon, oh, right, you fixed this.
What's happening? Oh, yeah, I just drag out another call.
Yeah. So this is a bug that, again, has been fixed in beta. We're actually using an old version of MakeCode right now, which is the released version. We've done some new fancier stuff that's kind of been going to other editors, but hasn't made it yet to Arcade. So hopefully we'll be doing an update soon, and we'll get a lot of these fixes that we've been doing. Everything will be a lot less buggy and a lot more pleasant to use.
Functions specifically will be a lot nicer.
Yeah.
We've done several cool function things.
Okay. So I'm going to put this update player projectile right here, which is in the if B button is pressed, but outside of this reset. And I'm going to put the create inside of this reset. So now we should see a sprite appear.
Hey. Oh.
That almost worked for a second.
I think it worked before you moved.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't expecting it to work, so that was kind of a surprise. Oh, right. It's because this update is setting the position to be the same as the player position. I was wondering why it was working at all. But let's keep doing this, but I'm going to move it a little bit to the right of the center of the player, because right now it looks a little weird. So I'm going to take this math. I'm going to do my sprite x plus. See, it's 8 wide, so I'll do 3, and that'll make it so it's still a little bit inside the player. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And then my guess as to what's happening is this destroy on wall is what's getting us. So it's getting bigger, it's touching the wall, and then it's getting destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this duplicate. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to set ghost to be true. And when we actually fire the projectile, I'm going to set ghost to be false so that it gets collisions again. This should prevent that. There we go. Okay. So I now I created the projectile, but we don't have the firing part yet. So it's just sitting there forever. Cool. I can create different sized red squares and litter them. Which is fun. Okay. So we've got create, we've got update. So the last thing to do is fire. So I'm going to create another function now. Let's fire. Again, before I forget, I'm going to put this call right in here. Again, above the set button, downtime to 0. And all I need to do inside of this function is to set the projectile's velocity and also set the ghost to no longer be true. And I'll probably duplicate this position. No, it should be fine. Should be fine. Yeah. So the reason that it was breaking before was because the image was getting bigger and then its position was getting adjusted. Now everything should be happening while it's ghost. So by the time it gets to this function, I think it should no longer be overlapping with the wall and it should work okay. But we'll try it out. We'll see what happens. So we don't want to do my sprite. Do projectile. Set vy to be 0. And then I think we had it at 100, but might end up making it.
Hey.
Cool. Awesome. So there's one other thing I'm going to do real quick, which is it's a little weird that it completely covers up the player right now. So let's go ahead and make it so that it's a little, the Z index is lower than the player's. And the Z depth, you know what? I'm not going to set the Z depth of the projectile because I haven't set a Z depth for the player. All Z depths start at 0. So as long as I set the player to be something larger than 0, should be good to go. Cool.
Yeah. You can move it forward by like 2 pixels.
Okay, let's do +5, see what happens. I also think that maybe making it the exact same size as the player was a bad idea. So I'm going to make it 14 by 14, which give us a little bit more space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Nice. I think you need to turn the ghost off.
Sorry, what was that?
The ghost.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to do that. Good catch, because I totally would have forgotten to do that. All right, so we're going to change set ghost to off. All right. So this is exciting. We have something that looks like a charge beam. Now let's make something real quick for us to hit with it. So I'm just going to make a basic enemy. And we just need something that has health so that we can start giving these different damage amounts. So the amount of damage it does is going to be based on how long you charged for. And to do that, we're going to be using the sprite data extension, which we've used a few times before. And I'm going to go ahead and add that now because I'm also going to be using that with the enemy. So to add a new extension, I'm going to go down to this plus extensions button. Ignore all of my local extensions. And then I'm going to add this arcade sprite data, the duck with a number on it. And everything looks the same, but if I go into the sprites category now, zoom in so you can actually see what I'm seeing. There is now a data group that has all of these different data functions that we can use. And this is really useful for setting like different healths for things, and that's what I'm going to be using it for today. Okay. So I always like to put my enemy creating code inside of a function because you very often need to reuse it. So let's go ahead and do create enemy. And I'm going to pass in 2 arguments to this. They're going to be an X and a Y. This is just going to put our enemy at that location.
I think those are text.
They are text, yes. I was going to write them out and then convert them into numbers. Okay. So creating enemy is going to be a lot like this create projectile. So I'm going to duplicate some code over here. Oh, no, don't rename. Oh, right. Can't use the name enemy because it's a sprite kind. So we're going to call it a bad dude. There we go. And we'll change this to enemy. And for the sprite, do something. It's a different kind of green. I'm gonna make these smaller than the player too. We'll make it 10 by 10. And the menacing behavior that these guys are going to have is that they're going to follow you very slowly. So I'm going to set bad dude to follow my sprite. And for the speed, we'll do like 50, which should be pretty slow. Okay, to test this code out, I'm just going to call this function. So let's go into functions, check out my create enemy, and we'll give it some values that actually make sense, like, I don't know, 40.
Ooh.
That's actually faster than I wanted it to move. Oh yeah, right. I didn't actually set the position. So obviously this these X and Y arguments aren't going to do anything. Okay, let me set the bad dude position to X and Y. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's menacing in that you have to watch it coming. Cool. All right. So right now I'm just creating them right here. I think I'll probably end up creating a bunch of them later, but we'll just leave it like this for now. And let's actually do the stuff I was talking about. So giving the enemy health and giving the charge beam different amounts of damage it can do. Doesn't really make sense to have a charge beam without enemies that have health, because if they don't have health, one shot always will do the job. So you want to make sure that they have probably health. Well, I mean, it depends on what enemy you're making. But for this one, I'm going to make it so that its health is lower than the maximum charge value's damage, but is higher than the most of the other ones. So that you either have to hit it at full charge or like multiple times, but below full charge. Okay. So inside of this create enemy, I'm going to go into sprites. I'm going to go down to that data category that we made. I'm going to drag out the top one, which is set data to number. So data can be of any type. It can, well, not any type. It can be number, string, Boolean, or a sprite, I believe. But right now, I'm just going to use numbers because that's all I really care about in this program. So we'll set it to health. And I'm going to set the number to be, let's say 10. Completely arbitrarily chosen. Okay, so now we have the bad dude. It has health. Let's add the overlaps code between the projectile and the bad dude, and then we can start changing the amount of damage for the charge. So kind of check out an on overlaps block. For the first kind, I'm going to change this to projectile. And for the second kind, I'm going to change it to enemy. So this will be whenever one of these projectiles hits one of these enemies. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is destroy the projectile. Also, I'm going to rename my hero right now because I did the thing that I always tell people never to do, which is leave my sprite. The reason you shouldn't leave my sprite in your programs is because it's the default value that shows up in all of the blocks. So if you drag out a block that says destroy and the default value is my sprite, you're going to end up destroying the player. So it's good to give it a different name. So I'm going to use my standard the player. It did make the coding faster, though. All right, so now if I fire, it gets destroyed when it hits the enemy, which is great. We also want to now change the health of the enemy. So now I'm just going to change it by 1, but we want to change it by more than 1 in a second. So let's go down to data again, and we're going to drag out this change. We're going to change other sprite, data, health. Now I did that by number.
I'm really excited about the health.
-1. Yeah, it's health. And we also want to check to see if the health is 0 now. So we're going to put in an if. We're going to go back to the sprites category and drag out the last one of the data blocks we haven't used yet for a number, and that is getting it. So we'll say a logic block, and we'll say if other sprite data health as number equals 0, then we're going to destroy the other sprites. All right, we can try this out real quick. I need to get to the right of this guy, so I'm going to wait for it to come over here for a sec. Go. Now if I hit it 10 times, it should. No, come on. Oh, there we go.
Oh.
There's something weird happening there.
It seemed like more than 10, but it's also hard to tell when they're both moving.
Yeah. Well, one way to test that is to have it say the amount of health it has left. So let's do that. Yeah, I know. Okay. We're going to say other sprites say, we'll drag out the text drawing, which is useful for turning stuff into a number. And we'll duplicate this block. Put it in. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely not going down as much as it should be.
It seems like it's just not overlapping. Sometimes.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this ghost thing is messing it up.
You could turn destroy on wall on instead of ghost off.
Yeah. That's good. So this might... Yeah, that's fine. It does appear to have fixed it, so cool. The other thing I'm going to do is once again make my enemy move even slower because it's being annoying now. And I'm going to make it spawn way to the right so that I don't have to keep. Too far?
I think, yeah. Oh!
There it is. Okay, we'll make this like 80 and hopefully that'll... Okay, that's fine.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
Now let's do our code to make this have different amounts of damage. So just like before, when we were setting the health on the sprite, I'm going to set a data value on this, which is going to be the amount of damage it does. So let's go ahead and just copy that code because I don't want to go back to the toolbox. So if its charge time is less than 100, I'm going to set projectile damage to 1. This will be the minimal amount of damage it does. And I'm going to duplicate this and just put it in all of the different if statements that we can decide on what a good value they are. Okay, so I want this top one to be 10.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do some values in between. So we could do like 1, and then like 2, and then 5, and 7.
Yeah.
That's good.
Cool.
Well, I think maybe the 5 one should be 4. so that it takes 3 of them.
Yeah, sounds
and
good.
2 of the, yeah.
Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to change this equal to be less than before I forget to do that, because we can do different amounts of damage now, and so it might end up going negative. And instead of changing this number by the -1 every time, instead we want to change it by the negative of the damage. So I'm going to drag out a math 0 minus, my favorite way to negate things. And we're going to get out the other sprite, or rather the sprite should be the second argument. Okay. Yep. All right, let's try that out.
Nice.
Less than or equal to 0. All right, so I did a charge shot, but I stopped at the second to last one, so it has 7 health left. I just do that. Cool.
Nice.
So this is working. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've got our pretty much everything I wanted to go over in this stream. So we could end it here, but I'm going to just real quick make it so that we can fire in left or right or up. So this is something that we did before, but it's kind of annoying to always fire to the right, because then you have to kind of manipulate where the enemies are. And hey, that could be a mechanic in your game, but it's not in this one. So I'm just going to use the velocity here, and I'm going to go inside of on-game update. Before this button code runs, that's important, I want to change the direction based on the velocity of the player. So I'm going to create a variable, and it's going to be called facing left. I always do facing left and not facing right. I don't really know which is better. I think one of them is probably easier to code, but. And I'm going to drag out a logic. I need to check the velocity, so we're going to have x, vx and vy. And I need an or, and this. So this is important because we only want to change our direction when the player is actually moving. So actually, we don't want to check velocity y at all. I don't know why I dragged out this for. So we only want this code to run if my sprite, or the player, vx does not equal 0. Otherwise, whenever the player stops moving, we're going to go back to facing left being whatever the default value is. So you could be facing right, stop moving, and then you're facing left again. It's really jarring for the player, and it's kind of hard to control. So, okay, if the player vx does not equal 0, then we are going to set facing left to be vx is less than 0. Negative vx means left. So, okay. So that's all good. Now we want to actually change the code to fire it in the direction that we are facing. So inside of this fire player projectile, I'm going to create an if statement. And right now I'm just going to do left and right. In a second, I'm also going to do up. So set projectile velocity, let's see, if facing left. Oop, that would be in variables, not in logic. Then we want to set it to be the negative. So we're going to do negative 100. And this should already work. So let me try it out. Cool. So it fired in the same direction I was moving. It was kind of hard to tell because I was moving at the same speed, but. All right. I'm going to refactor this a little bit. So I'm going to create a speed variable which is not very descriptively named. I'm going to change this to 200. And I will use speed here and negative speed here. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to do up and down, or maybe just up. Maybe I'll do up and down, actually. We didn't do that before, so maybe you can also fire down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move this facing left to be this, because if you're holding up or you're holding down, we want that to override whichever direction you're going in, because there's no other reason to push those buttons unless you're aiming. So we always want that to be the direction you fire in if you are holding down one of those buttons. So go into controller. We're going to drag out this is button pressed, change it to up. We'll do up first. So we'll favor up because that's kind of the more likely choice. If you are somehow holding down the up and down buttons, which is possible on a keyboard or some things that have disconnected buttons, then it's still going to fire up and not down. Okay, so set down. Then we're going to set the projectile velocity to be 0 for the VX. So I'll change that to 0. And if we're going down, then the Y should be positive because Y goes down. So we'll set it to speed. If we're going up, we want it to be the negative speed. And let's try this out real quick. So I'm holding up right now. Cool, fired up. Holding down. Firing down. Okay. And the last piece of code I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this if statement. And I don't like right now how when I hold down, but I'm moving to the right, it's still on the left side of me. I want it to be in the direction where it's going to go. So what I'm going to do is take this if statement. I can get rid of the velocity parts, but the cases are going to be the same.
I think you could get away with not doing up or down if you wanted. But
yeah, it's going to be a little weird anyway. So you know what? Let's not even do up or down. That's a good point. So I'm going to change this to, at this point, it would have been faster to recreate this.
We're in it now.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Where was the update player projectile? There it is. Okay, so if facing left, actually, we did it for facing right. So if facing left, we're going to change this plus into a minus. And now it should.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about it. This isn't much of a game, but it gets apart. I hope it gets across kind of what we were trying to do, which is how to do this kind of firing weapon that you have to charge up first. And that does different amounts of damage besides that. Do you guys have a name for this one? Most important part of the stream.
I feel like all-terrain should be part of it because you can shoot it in any direction. You're an all-terrain shooter.
Okay.
Good.
All-terrain 4x4 shooter. I just put a car thing in there.
I didn't know that was a car thing. I was like 4 pixels by 4 pixels.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been the MakeCode Arcade Advanced stream. Once again, I'm Richard, at Richard on the forum.
I'm Shannon, at Shakal on the forum.
And I'm Vivian, at Live Cheerful on the forum.
And thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time.